I thought I knew epic fantasy, but boy was I wrong. Nothing could have prepared me for the majesty, the brilliance, the intimidation, the confusion of Malazan, Book of the Fallen. Book 1, Gardens of the Moon, because it's not just a book. It's an initiation to a broader world. It's an experience to be had. So how did it compare to other fantasy books I've read? How does it compare as a start to an epic fantasy series? Let's find out. I'm Nikhil Koparkar with Shelf-Esteem, and this is my spoiler-free and spoiler-filled review of Gardens of the Moon. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Nikhil with Shelf-Esteem. I'm a composer, now also booktuber. You can find my music in The Wheel of Time Season 2, His Dark Materials Season 3, and the newly released psychological horror film, Dead Whisper. So, don't often do reviews on this channel, but we are doing a read-along, an official channel read-along of the entire 10 books of Malazan, Book of the Fallen. So, we started January 2025 with Gardens of the Moon. 46 strong. All reading together, talking on the Discord channel, linked below, talking on the FABLE app, also linked below, chapter by chapter, section by section, as we tackle this mammoth series. So, how did I feel about it? Well, let's first talk about what this book is about, and I'm going to read a description here for you. Vast legions of gods, mages, humans, dragons, and all manners of creatures play out the fate of the Malazan Empire in this first book in a major epic fantasy series from Erikson. The Malazan Empire simmers with discontent, bled dry by interminable warfare, bitter infighting and bloody confrontations with the formidable Anamander Rake and his Tistiandi, ancient and implacable sorcerers. Even the imperial legions, long inured to the bloodshed, yearn for some respite, yet Emperor Lassine's rule remains absolute, enforced by her dread claw assassins. For Sergeant Whiskey Jack and his squad of bridge burners, and for Tattersail's surviving cadre mage of the 2nd Legion, the aftermath of the Siege of Pale should have been a time to mourn the many dead. But Darujistan, last of the free cities of Genebacus, yet holds out. It is to this ancient citadel that Lassine turns her predatory gaze. With that, 1999's Gardens of the Moon. So, let's talk a little bit about a background for this book, because it kind of sheds light on what makes this book good and what makes this book difficult. Now, a little caveat before I start. I'm going to keep this first section spoiler-free, and I'll let you guys know when the spoiler section comes, because I know a lot of you are on this read-along. You want to kind of hear about the highlights of the book, and, we could discuss in the comments and everything. So I'll let you know about that, of course in the video and also in the timestamps. So I want to make sure I don't spoil this majesty of a series for anyone. It's very important to me, and I know it's important to you. So if you like this kind of video, please like and subscribe. And now on to the book. So first of all, this story of Malazan Book of the Fallen was conceived by Erikson and Ian Esselman when they were playing Dungeons and Dragons. So it kind of gives you an idea of what the story is like, and the impetus of it. And once you start reading it, it makes a lot of sense why the D&D campaigns they were playing at the time of writing it, would have fleshed out this world, because the types of magic system, the types of character interplays and things like that sounds like something that you would see in a D&D campaign. It's also why it sometimes becomes a little confusing, especially at the outset, because you're kind of being dropped into a game, in the middle of a game. There are games between people, there are games between different species, there's games between gods, and gods start to interfere into this larger world. Very interesting kind of turn of events of how this thing came about. They first started trying to pitch it as a film script in Hollywood in the early 90s. Didn't work out so well, so they decided to write a book instead. So Erikson wrote the Malazan Book of the Fallen 10-book series. Then there's, of course, some side novels. There are some prequel series. There are some other spin-off series, some by Ian Esselman as well. But the 10 very big books were written by Erikson, the first one being published in 1999, and the last one in that 10-book series being published in 2013. So let's first talk about the 3 things that make Malazan Book of the Fallen, and specifically Gardens of the Moon, very unique. Now, this series is often touted as one of the most complex fantasy series of all time. It is also one of the most dense. I mean, you have, 16 different continents. You have 300,000 years of history. You have multiple species of beings. And oftentimes Steven Erikson doesn't introduce you into the world in a way a normal author does, right? Slow dripping information, maybe a little info dumping, right? This is the kind of world that is so vast that if he was to info dump, you could have entire books that were info dumps. And that's not really a pleasurable read, right? So something needs to be sacrificed. And in order for him to write a world that can be cohesive, have all these different threads running together, kind of has to drop you in the middle of the action, right? Kind of have you figure it out for yourself. Now, he leaves plenty of breadcrumbs throughout, and I feel like Gardens of the Moon is no exception to this. The second unique thing about Malazan Book of the Fallen, and specifically Gardens of the Moon, is the magic system. Now, it's not a hard magic system in the way Brandon Sanderson's magic system is. There's no rules that are kind of outlined in the back, in the appendices, right, for you to figure out what's going on. And in fact, they talk about warrens as this broad magical term. Now, when you first are introduced to warrens, you think, okay, maybe it's kind of like a portal or something that people can travel through or something like that. But then as the story starts to progress, they start to mention warrens in different contexts, and you start to realize, there's a lot more at play here. Not only that, you're not only having people participating in this magic, you're having gods participate as well. So I thought that was a very interesting way to play it, because you don't often see that interplay where gods are meddling in the affairs of the people below. So that I thought was really interesting. The third thing that I would say that is very unique about the story and can be frustrating for a lot of readers, so I would say temper your expectations when you're going into this book, is the characters are phenomenal, except you don't always know who's on whose side. Right? Sometimes you'll start to see alliances start, and then suddenly a character will do something that is out of character for them. And you go, hey, wait a minute, I thought they were on the same side. Why are they suddenly fighting each other? Steven Erikson doesn't provide you with that extra layer of context that gives you an idea. And so you're kind of forced to figure out the political machinations of these different characters on your own. But let me tell you, it's quite a rewarding experience, actually, because again, like I mentioned, he leaves you enough breadcrumbs to try to figure it out on your own. And it's a little bit of a mystery box, right? You're kind of trying to figure out, wait a minute, why are these characters now fighting each other? And as you start to zoom out from the story and you see a broader implications between these characters, you start to realize, oh, this person was actually 2 chess moves ahead of this other person, and you start to see a little bit more of that. So these are little caveats, but are also actually strengths of the novel and of the series at large. The last thing I would say I really love about this book is Steven Erikson's prose. Now, I feel that Steven Erikson's prose is the perfect balance between poetically beautiful and flowery and direct at the same time. There's prose that ends up being beautiful, but it ends up being so dense sometimes that it takes you out of the story. Not with Steven Erikson. I feel like his prose is both direct and it kind of strikes at the heart of you, and yet it's very poetic. So it makes you want to keep reading while still captivating you with his words. So that's one thing that I would say is a wonderful aspect of Gardens of the Moon as well. So the question becomes, should you read it? So I would say if you like slow burn epic fantasy with many different characters at play, if you like political intrigue where characters are 2 steps ahead of each other, if you like magic systems that are not quite explained, if you like to not know what's going on, but you love being on the journey anyways, then this is definitely the book for you. Now, this being a low point of the series from a lot of readers, is due to the fact that confusion is right at the outset. So, if you don't like to be confused and you like a more direct story, this series is probably not for you. I could be wrong. Malazan fans, let me know in the comments if I'm wrong about this, but it seems like, I don't have a huge experience reading these books, right? I've only read 2 so far. I'm on a reread now of this first one with you all, and gonna continue on through the 10 very big books. So yeah, I would love to know if you all think the same. But it seems to be that if you want a more direct story, this one might not be for you. All right, now we are going to enter the spoiler-filled section. So if you haven't read this book, feel free to click off now. I just want to make sure I don't spoil it for anyone. And for those of you who are on the read-along and want to kind of talk a little bit about this stuff, I really want to, speak to you in the comments, in the Discord, anywhere you would want to, because it's fun to discuss this stuff together, okay? So, spoilers in 3, 2, 1. Let's talk about favorite characters. I feel like the cast of characters for this is so varied that everyone's going to have a different favorite. There are characters that you love to hate. There's characters that you feel like, they're going to be the bad characters, the antagonists of the series. But then you start to read more and you go, maybe not. Same vice versa with some of the good characters. Oh, this is the character to root for. And then you find out something about their past that goes, oh, that's pretty horrible, you know? And so it's just interesting to see how characters have evolved, and you're seeing them at a particular point in their lives. But that's not who they are as people, right? Because there's so much more than that, just as we are in human nature. So that's an interesting thing. So my favorite characters, if I had to outline 3 that are my favorite right now, as of this reading, is Captain Ganos Paran. Now, interesting character. You kind of meet him at the very beginning of the story when the mouse quarter of the Malaz city is being sacked, and he has romantic ideas of what being a soldier would be. But as the story starts to progress, he starts to realize, this is probably not what it's all cracked up to be, right? At least in this book, he seems like someone who is trying to do good. He's kind of more innocent, at least in the start of this series. So I'm interested to see how his character kind of progresses through. The second character that I really loved, probably my favorite if I had to choose between the 3, is Tattersail. I love the interplay between Tattersail and Paran. Tattersail starts to kind of nurse Paran back to health, and they have like a romantic relationship as well. Tattersail kind of exemplifies to me in this series, at least in this book, the meaning of sacrifice, as she fights Balurdan to the death. Interestingly enough for her, you start to realize that there's more going on behind the scenes than you think, for 2 reasons. One is you kind of start to see there's an allusion to the fact that she might have been reincarnated following her and Balurdan being incinerated during their battle together. And the second thing was, with Tattersail, there's more than meets the eye, right? In conversations with Adjunct Lorne, who works for Emperor Lazine, Lorne realizes that Tattersail was one of the mages that during the sacking of, I think it was Mouse Quarters, the riots there, led to the death of Lorne's family. So Tattersail has a little bit of a checkered past, one could say. So it's interesting to see. Again, Tattersail is one of those characters that you feel like, oh, purely a cool person, someone I want to get behind. And you start to realize, a little bit of a, kind of checkered past history there. So that's one thing I really love about these characters, is nothing is quite as it seems. So speaking of nothing is quite as it seems, let's go to the third favorite character. The third favorite character being Sari, aka Apsalar, aka the fisher girl from Itko Khan. The girl who's possessed by Cotillion, which I believe is one of the agents of Shadow, if I remember correctly. So, very interesting to see her character, because she joins the Bridge Burners as like a 13 or 15-year-old or something like that. She kind of creeps everybody out because she is really good at using twisted ways of getting information, and she's just kind of a cold-blooded killer. They already know that something doesn't feel right with her, and they correctly guess that, they can see elements of the Shadow Warren around her. So she's definitely something that's a force to contend with. And as she, as Cotillion releases his hold over her, and she's no longer possessed, and she decides to be called Apsalar, her character also completely changes. So it's interesting to see how characters, when there are bigger forces at play, let's say, act in a particular way, and then when they're just acting of their own machinations, they're acting in a different way. So it becomes a little confusing, but it's also very intriguing to know, like, there's multiple characters in this one character, right? So that's one thing that I really liked. So let's talk a little bit about what was the scene that did it for me, the one that made me go, I'm going to read this entire series. Because when you start a first book, it's a little bit kind of scary, right? Especially a 10-book series, one that you hear so much about that's supposed to be intimidating. Which is the scene that kind of cemented it for me personally? And I would love to know your thoughts if it differs from me. But for me, it was the Siege of Pale, the Battle of Moonspawn, which appears very early in the book. But it's a battle that seems like it could be the end of a trilogy. It seems like it could be the end of a series. It's that epic, it's that massive, of a castle that's moving in the sky, right? And if you see this particular image, you'll see what it looks like. This is like one of those battles to end all battles, right? You have Taishren, Kadri, and you have Tattersail, Kadri Mage, and they are there with like a whole big army, and they're trying to fight Anamander Rake, being the Lord of Moonspawn. And there seems to be some sort of a maybe betrayal by Taishren, possibly. And the army gets wiped out, and there's this huge battle. And it is probably one of the most epic things I have ever read. I really love this battle. It made kind of cemented. I'm like, if it's going to be this early in the book, that just means it's going to get more epic. It's going to get more crazy. So that was kind of the scene for me that cemented it for me. Around that same time, the second part that really resonated with me was Hairlock, who has his own agenda, right? And as he's dying, able to bring his soul into the body of a puppet. I mean, like, there's so much stuff going on in this book. So I just thought that storyline was very intriguing. Also, Hairlock's fight with the hounds. I love this illusion of this great power that is trapped in a prison in the Godrobi Hills. And Adjunct Lorne and the Tilana Imas, I believe, are trying to free this particular tyrant and win the war. And it all goes awry. I thought that whole sequence was fantastic. That whole book, that little subsection within this book, was also really fantastic. So those were my 3 favorite moments, but what were yours? Because I know a lot happens in this book, and it's almost like, you know, I just finished it maybe about a week ago, and already I feel like I need to reread some of that wiki and kind of like, oh yeah, that's right, I forgot that happened in this book, you know? It's like there's so much stuff that actually occurs in this book, and that can be both pleasurable to read and also daunting for new readers. So I would love to know what you thought about Malazan Book of the Fallen, if you've read it, what you thought specifically about Gardens of the Moon. Where would it rank on your 10 book rankings? If you're along for the read along, I would love to know what you thought of this first entry. Are you excited to continue on, or are you dipping out? Are you saying, screw this series, I don't want to be a part of it anymore? And if you're thinking of trying Malazan Book of the Fallen and you want to join us on a read along, you know, we have 46 strong. We have a bunch of veterans who are on the Discord channel that are just out of the goodness of their heart and wanting to see other people experience the series for the first time. They're all about helping out, you know, and so they're on the Discord channel, they're on the FABLE app, and so chapter by chapter you'll sometimes see I will ask some questions. I'll be like, hey, I was a little confused about this one part, and they'll go, oh, don't worry, you'll see in book 3 why this such and such is the case, or they'll, you know, kindly explain and give further context to the machinations of these different characters. So I've been loving this community for that reason, because this series can be very daunting for a lot of people. I mean, I've read fantasy now pretty much nonstop for the last 5 years, and I still find it daunting. And I think it's one of those types of series that there's a lot of layers to peel back. I imagine that on a reread, I'm going to get so much more out of this first book. But I still really enjoyed the ride. So if I was to give this a rating, I would give it 4.25 out of 5. What would you rate this book? I'm Nick here with Shelf-Esteem. Thank you so much for watching this review. I would love to know what I can continue to do to make these better. And also, you know, if you think of anything I should do for the next book, you have any ideas that you'd want to see for Dead House Gates, let me know, because I'm going to be doing reviews for each one, but I want to also do some extra content for our official channel read along. So if you've been thinking about joining this, please join us. We have a nice Discord channel, and we have a lot of people here that would love to help you out as well. So I'm Nick here with Shelf-Esteem. Be good to yourselves, be good to each other. Please like and subscribe. It always helps the algorithm find this video and push it out to the people that would want to see it. And I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Happy reading, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.